الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
So people want to pull up the text. You can pull it up on your phones. It's the Book of Assistance by Imam Al-Haddad. There's PDFs of it all over the internet. If people want to pull it up. We've been looking at this text, Bismillah. We've been looking at this text, and it offers a roadmap to just kind of spiritual elevation. And for those who haven't been here before, to give a quick recap, our religious tradition essentially synergizes religion, ethics, and spirituality. It doesn't see these as things that exist in vacuums or silos, but it sees them as something that builds upon one another, is intrinsically linked. And we're in the second chapter of this text, which is a text that essentially provides, through very easily digestible chapters, each chapter is a page to 3 pages, an opportunity for us to have a practical implementation towards that increase in spirituality. And where we had defined spirituality so that it's not ambiguous was essentially the mechanism that allows for us to draw meaning from the world around us, to take understanding and purpose. And I'll give you an example. Somebody asked me, like, why am I dressed so nice today? And somebody also said, you should dress more nicely regularly. And I said, thanks. I feel really terrible and great about myself simultaneously. I was speaking at a conference this morning with different faith leaders on re-entry projects that are done in North Jersey. Re-entry meaning formerly incarcerated individuals now re-entering into society, finding jobs, finding community, finding just space to live their lives. And many of these are people who were incarcerated in the first place for crimes that make no sense, right? You have to understand, and it's very relevant to this conversation we're going to have, continued on the second chapter around intentions, as to how perspective is something that gives us a deep understanding of the self, and why sometimes intention becomes the key to shifting paradigms so that we can see things now a little bit differently. So one of the former governors of New Jersey was interviewing me during my session, and he now runs this re-entry program in North Jersey. And he told a story of a 14-year-old kid by the name of Calvin. Right? He's 14 years old, and he was incarcerated for years as a 14-year-old because he was driving a car that adults had committed a crime, and since he was simply driving it, they put him away for even longer than the adults who committed the crime. Makes no sense. And the entire premise of this conference was billed under a title called Second Chances, right? The idea as to what do different faith traditions say about giving people second chances. And the sub-premise to it was forgiveness. How do we forgive the people who are re-entering society? And so when I got on the mic, I had heard some other people talk about things, and then they posed some questions to me. It was one-on-one conversation for like 30, 40 minutes. And I said to them, let's go back to this discussion and understand this in a way that we shift the paradigm. Because the mode is something that is so deeply rooted in arrogance that we believe that somehow we have a right to seek forgiveness from this 14-year-old boy, as if it made any sense that he was put into jail in the first place. And what our theological tradition teaches us, I told this audience, Islam is really big on accountability. There's a day of judgment. May Allah grant us all ease on that day and give us entrance into His Jannah without any judgment. But on that day, what our tradition teaches us is that this 14-year-old is going to be able to hold us into account, that we didn't dismantle the systems simply because we privilege and benefit from them that got him incarcerated in the first place. And we have to shift the entire perspective, because right now some of you in this room think that he needs to seek our forgiveness and we are the ones that are empowered to forgive him. But in reality, we're the ones that should be apologizing profusely. What kind of society have we built entrenched in anti-blackness that can somehow justify at the end result as if we are doing something honorable to give restitution to a 14-year-old child that should have never been in prison in the first place? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you see how this is attached to intentions? That it's not a joke. This is Nia, right? We got, how old are you?
I'm 12.
He's 12 years old. Can you stand up? Sorry, not to put you on the spot. It's your first time here. You might not ever come back again after this, right? He's 12. The boy is 2 years older than him, and then has to live a life, you can sit down, man, now where he not only goes as a 14-year-old in an adult prison for years of his formative identity and internalizes trauma that no human should have to go through, but when he is released from that system, he's also then shunned and marginalized. And if you as a Muslim don't get your intention in check, and you don't figure out what all of this is about, and why you do what you do, what's the point of all of this? There's going to continue to be people that when we have capacity, not when we don't have capacity, when we have capacity to do, but we simply choose not to because we're looking at it in this really perverse way that somehow this kid owes us an apology. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the gift of intention is that it renders consciousness and awareness. It allows for you to not just see from your eyes, but see from your heart. And to be able to understand that the idea is, how do I fit in as a remedy? And how am I never like the catalyst of illness? Does this make sense? If you don't start with intentions, then you're going to be able to justify anything always. And just because everybody buys into it doesn't mean that it makes sense. Does that make sense? It's a very important topic that we hear regurgitated again and again, but at this phase of your identity, whether you are here and you are a preteen, or you are here and you are pushing 60 or 70, or anything in between, you got to constantly go back to this idea of what is it all about? Why am I doing what it is that I'm doing? So that I don't have the bare minimum honored of responsibility, and I'm pushing myself to live to the fullest of my capacity, so that when I stand in front of Allah, accountability isn't something that I just glossed over, but the why of what I do then gets me up to do the things that I have the capacity to do, and I have the ability to get done. Does that make sense? Are you sure? Because people are nodding their heads, and if I ask you, if you're nodding your head, what am I talking about? I'm going to expect an answer. What am I talking about? Somebody tell me. How is this relevant to anything that we've spoken about thus far? You just sit on it. Yeah, go ahead. Hassan.
So, not so much to do with intention, but in the prior chapter we were talking about the mercifulness of God, and when you were talking about forgiveness, I think it's important to go in with certain intentions, because if we look at forgiveness as a divine quality, then who are we to not be able to forgive?
Yeah, definitely. I want you to let it simmer for a bit, and let's let it kind of be a frame through which we engage this conversation. Can somebody read from the first part of the chapter? We're on chapter 2 on intention. So the first chapter was on certitude, yaqeen, and we said that this was a first chapter because Imam al-Haddad is giving us the destination, right? We all start in different parts of a journey spiritually. Everybody's not in the same place. So having a common destination makes sense as opposed to a common starting point because you're not starting from the same place. And intention now is a great precursor to the steps you take because everybody can start with a look within. Why am I in the job that I'm in? What is it really about? Why am I pursuing the marriage I'm pursuing? What is it really about? Why do I chase after the things I chase after? In a way that then renders contentment and balance. That's the idea with this. I want to see beauty in things. I want to be in a place where I'm drawn towards goodness, not temporary satisfaction or things that are materialistic. Can somebody start from that first part? You must. Yeah, go ahead.
You must, O my brother, improve the soundness and sincerity of your intentions. Examine them and reflect well before embarking on your actions. For intentions are the bases of deeds. According to them, your deeds will either be good or ugly, sound or unsound. The Prophet has said, may blessings and peace be upon him. Deeds are only according to intentions. Each man has that which he intends.
So where we left off last week was looking at core beliefs. And core beliefs are essentially what we all cognitively understand the world through, right? A core belief gives me an understanding of how I see myself, how I see people around me, how I understand the world around me. And a core belief is not abstract doctrine or theology that you memorize in a text, but it's something that fundamentally functions within you individually and affirms itself every single time you process information. So a core belief can be positive or negative. I am worthy of love. I am not worthy of love. I am worthy of success. I am not worthy of success. Do people remember this conversation from last week for those who are here? Yeah. And then the core belief becomes the foundation. That you are in this place of not understanding why, just explicitly or outwardly, but inwardly. Why do I see things in the ways that I do? Why do I behave in the way that I behave? So a core belief can be rooted now in your own socialization. If you grew up in the way that the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ grew up, and they heard his grandfather say that they love him, that they're in a place where they have this encouragement, positivity, they have supportive environment, then you're going to definitely grow up the way that Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma grew up, where they have now audacious hearts. They're bold and they're courageous because their socialization in the school of the Prophet ﷺ was rooted in the formation of positive core beliefs. If you all, since last week till this week, told yourselves like 10, 20, 30 times a day, as you were remembering our halaqah last time, that, man, Khalid Latif is so stupid. He's so stupid. What a stupid guy. And every day you're hearing that voice again and again and again. Then regardless of what would come out of my mouth, you'd be like, man, he's so dumb. It builds itself up now as perspective that overwhelms how it is that we process things. You are a function of every yesterday that you live. You do certain things because of this core belief structure. You want to do it with empathy and love. And you want to formulate positive core beliefs. The second level of that core belief structure are intermediary beliefs. These are where we set rules and assumptions up. So I'm not worthy of love, then builds a rule. If I was worthy of love, then, people would invite me to things. If I were thin, people would like me. And then the third layer becomes actions, habits, thoughts, stemming from these unconsciously formulated core beliefs that impacts now how you see yourself, how you understand that people see you, and it's going to impact why you do the things that you do. Because if I believe I'm not worthy of love, and then I tell myself at an intermediary level, if I were thin, people would love me, then I would have habits that would say that I just need to have drastic dieting. Or you see this in like the Indian subcontinent, where people will monetize everything to get you to believe you are the worst of anything that you are, right? And a lot of this is rooted in whiteness and anti-blackness. Supremacy is globalized. You got to understand the psychological impact that it has, where there's entire industries of skin whitening cream that we all know about, but not something to joke around, but fundamentally understand. Why would somebody want their skin to be lighter? How does someone get to a place where the why of their action is rooted in understanding this structure? I'm not beautiful. Nobody loves me. If I was lighter, then people would love me. Do you get what I'm saying? Somebody walked into this room and told you that that's how they see the world. Would you say to them that that's a good way to see the world? And I hope all of you would say no, that that's a terrible way. But if it's wrong for that person, then you shouldn't have to succumb to it also. And the reality of having supportive community is so that you can now build understanding in a way that creates a sense of energy and empowerment. You are beautiful because Allah made you beautiful. And He said that He made you beautiful. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. And all the clutter and the things that come into play, we want to think about now in terms of the heart, because this is the place where intention lies. You have 4 layers to the heart. The outer layer is what we call the sadr, right? You have du'as from Musa alayhi salam. Rabbi shrah li sadri. People have heard this dua before? Yeah, right? Alam nashrah laka sadrak, right? Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas. That shaitan whispers into the hearts of man. This is the outer layer of the heart. You then have a second layer, if we had kind of concentric circles, that is called the qalb, the spiritual heart. The third layer inwardly is called the fu'ad. This is what gives abode to emotions, feelings. You are emotional, that's what makes you human. And then the center of it is called the lub. All of these things make up your spiritual heart. And this is where you give abode to these core beliefs. You might not have been the reason as to why they're put inside of you, but you got to be able to deal with them in some capacity. So that you're constructing positive core beliefs, and then you see the role that you play in formulating for others positive core beliefs as well. Because sometimes it's not just as simple as, well, go and get it done. But understanding the intention behind it is rooted in an inward process, right? Why do you chase after the degree you chase after? Do it on your own terms. You are good whether you are a doctor or not. You are good whether you are married or not. You are good whether you have children or not, whether you have money or not. These are things that are facts. What gets in the way as obstacles are now inward processes that set up arbitrary metrics of success that we chase after for validation. They're purposely built to make you then just go buy what everybody's selling to you so that they get more of your money and you believe that that's going to be the source of your happiness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? The Prophet tells us, "Ala wa inna fil jasadi mudghatan idha saluhat saluha al jasadu kullu wa idha fasadat fasada al jasadu kullu ala wa hiya al qalb." That indeed in your jasad there's a morsel of flesh. If it's good, then everything will be good. If it's not good, then everything won't be good. Indeed, it's your heart. You take some time as you set out in every day your spiritual journey to look within and to see what's really there that's functioning in this way as a core belief structure. The companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, ayyu nasi afdal, that which person is the best? And the expectation was that they were going to get a response that had a specific name, maybe Musa alayhi salam or Yusuf alayhi salam. And the Prophet ﷺ, instead of responding with specificity, gives now a more generic definition. قُلٌ مَخْمُومَ الْقُلُوبِ صُدُوقِ اللِّسَانِ, that everyone that has a heart that's makhmoom and a tongue that's trustworthy. In Arabic, when you say something like خَمَمْتُ الْغُرْفَةِ, you said they swept the room clean with a broom. And a heart that's makhmoom is like a heart that's been swept clean with a broom. Does it make sense, the illustration? And the Prophet alludes to this in his definition, where he says, "Huwa taqi wa naqi la ithma fihi wa la baghi wa la ghilla wa la hasad." That it is a heart that's awake. It has consciousness. It has taqwa. It is naqi. It is clean. It is pure. La ithma fihi wa la baghi. That in it there is no bitterness or aggression. Wa la ghilla wa la hasad. No envy. No kind of rancor. May Allah grant us all hearts that are like this. It doesn't happen just by chance. If the world seeks to captivate you and put you into these boxes, and you have lived every day of your life in pursuit of things, consciously or unconsciously, that are not meant to give you that sense of balance, and the paradigm shift becomes important to then understand its purpose and with intentionality, use it as a way to leverage yourself forward. But if I asked you to dare to look in your own heart, and then just think, what resides in it right now? What would you say? And not as a good or a bad. Can we have people just move up so we're not cluttering into the hallway? Let's come close and make room for people. And that can be a scary conversation to have, especially because so much of the world teaches us to just look at ourselves externally and outwardly. But it still becomes a necessary, because otherwise you're going to start running on empty, and things that are supposed to feel good, they're just going to feel miserable. And you're going to turn towards things that just give you temporary satisfaction and release. And you want to be a person of rida, like long-term contentment. May Allah make us from amongst them. So I want you to take a minute to just sit with yourself, right? Rather than us talking to each other. And I want you to just look within yourself. What's really going on in your heart right now? Does it have within it joy, content? It can hold a lot of different things. But where do I stand in relation to it? It's the seat of pretty much everything. How do I engage it and understand it? Am I actually taking care of it? Because this is the place of intention. And if intention is not consciously formulated there, it doesn't mean that the heart is now not consuming everything that we're throwing at it. Do you get what I mean? What I would love for people to do between this week and next week, as you kind of sit with this, is open a notebook and actually, why don't we do it now? Just so we have it. If you don't have a notebook, take out a phone and write a note to yourself. Right? In this formulation of core beliefs. Write I am and then fill the blank. I am not and fill the blank. People are and fill the blank. People are not and fill the blank. The world is and fill the blank. The world is not, and then you fill the blank. You have to be vulnerable with yourself. It's not easy. And if you can't think about it at the core belief level, think about it at the level of rules and assumptions. What are things that govern your decisions? If this, then this, right? If I don't talk to people, then no one will reject me. And then you understand a core belief from there that says the world is a scary place. The world is not easy. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so what were the questions that you said? You said, I am not, people are, what else?
People are not, the world is not. And then you finish the sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can you provide an example of the type of words we can use?
It could be anything. I am worthy of love. I am not worthy of love. Right? I am beautiful. I am not beautiful. Right? I am ugly. I am worthy of success. People are horrible. People are great. The world is, painful. You see what I mean? And those things, if we say them enough and we are anchored by them, that's how you're going to walk through the world, and you're going to see the world in that way. And then the actions are going to stem from that cognitive function. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I mean, this was a question I was going to ask like a couple minutes ago. That's fine. So, what would you say to people who have core beliefs that, let's say, that help them, get through life in general, right? Let's say that they like to stick to that because it's what they're comfortable with. But let's say some of those core beliefs are maybe not good core beliefs, but they still stick with it because it helps. What would you say to them to encourage them to change, perhaps?
Resentment, let's use a certain example. I work with a lot of survivors of abuse. May Allah make things easy for them. And resentment is not a bad thing, because resentment becomes the vehicle through which you could stand and say, you're wronging me. I resent your treatment of me. Do you understand so far? Resentment is necessary in that moment. Now the challenge that comes in is that sense of strength I feel at that moment of exercising resentment, I want to feel that regularly. And because the vehicle through it that I felt it was resentment, it now creates the adverse effect that every time I have to exercise resentment again and again and again, it's hurting myself inside a little bit. You don't want to have all kinds of stress on a regular basis. You don't want to feel like that anxiety that comes from the bear attacking you and it puts you in a fight or flight mode. So what might feel like it's giving you something in the moment is now cultivating in the long term things that can be potentially problematic. How you can navigate some of these things is being open to the idea that this entire conversation is rooted in, I don't know everything about myself. And there's always still things for me to learn about me. And myself is going to be in a state of fluctuation as I get older and I grow through certain life experiences. But the catalyst for things cannot be rooted in a negative in order to have healthiness. And what I would say to somebody who goes through the exercise is that you just sit down and talk it out with somebody so that you're not in your own head and potentially how you're framing it, the paradigm can be shifted and what you're seeing as a negative can actually be a positive potentially, but you need to say it and put it out there to somebody and not just be within yourself. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. And so talk to people. We're here to talk to you. You want to talk to somebody? I'm down. I know I talk a lot, but I also listen pretty well, and I won't talk so much, I promise. But it's really hard to be sad. And may Allah make you always those who feel loved and never feel unloved. It's that much harder when you have to feel sad by yourself. It doesn't make it easier, it makes it that much worse, right? So this core belief is part of how we want to understand the why. We want to now pivot into a second kind of mode of understanding this, the why of what we do, and think about this through a prism of just habits that formulate consciously and unconsciously. We all have a cognitive bias that's negative, and that's just something that is there. Every person errs on the side of negativity. There's 4 modes of thoughts that exist in our spiritual tradition. You can have thoughts that are Rabbani, like has the word Rabb in it. These are thoughts that are just overtly positive. They compel you to do things that are good. You're the one that cleans up after iftar. You're the one that waits till everybody eats before you eat. You're the one that checks in on people and doesn't hesitate to do things that are good. You then have a second layer that are called malakani thoughts, right? Angelic thoughts. Malaika are angels in our tradition. These are also good, but not at the level of a Rabbani thought. The third thoughts that you can have are nafsani thoughts. These are thoughts that will tell you, don't pray your sunnahs. They're not that important. Somebody else is going to clean up. Why do you have to let the older person eat first? Go fill your stomach. The nafs by its nature is lazy. It doesn't want you to be generous or charitable. It's very much about simple satisfaction. May Allah protect us from it. But in understanding that it's a mode of thought. And then the last set of thoughts are shaitani thoughts. These are thoughts that just tell you to do haram, right? Just don't pray at all. And it builds itself now enough that it becomes habitual. You and I think 12,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. The idea isn't to just think, because everybody thinks. The idea is to reclaim our ability to choose how we think about what we think about and what we're thinking about in the first place. 96% of our thoughts are repeat thoughts. They're done unconsciously. That means on average, we use 4% of our brain in conscious modes of thinking. The rest is just on autopilot. And that's dangerous when 4 out of 5 thoughts that you have statistically are negative. They're rooted in self-deprecation, self-loathing, hating others, and they just compound. 4 out of 5, 80% of the 12,000 to 70,000, and then 96% of the time, they're just repeats again and again and again. You see what I mean? And so what this intention process does, it says, hey man, just sit and be still. It's okay to rest. I, for the life of me, don't understand the number of people that have come into my office in the last 2 months who their biggest challenge is they feel like they're doing something wrong just when they take a moment to rest. That you just pause to breathe. It's okay. The world is not going to stop. You don't have to now use it as an escape from reality, but on your terms. You're building into your routine moments where all of those things are not running helter-skelter, and it's always a decision in a frenzy. But you just learn to breathe, and then you let it out. You can get to a place where the thoughts just become habitual again and again. And there's so many things that we do in this mode that it's not necessarily something that we understand why we do it. I had an intern of mine that worked here one summer. She was a PhD candidate in psychology. And we were talking about habit formation, and she essentially gave me an example where her recipe for cooking leg of lamb cut the leg of lamb in the middle of the leg. And somebody came over one day and saw her cut this leg of lamb in the middle and then throw away a good chunk of meat. And they said, "Why are you doing this?" And she said, "What do you mean?" It's how you make leg of lamb. And she said, "No, you just throw away like a whole meal for another group of people." And so she didn't know. She didn't know why she did this. So she went and asked her mother, who gave her the recipe. And her mom said, "I don't know." And then her mom asked their grandmother. And then when they asked their grandmother, the grandmother said, "When we first moved to this country, we didn't have a lot of money. And the oven that we owned was very, very small as a result. So in order to fit the leg of lamb in the oven, we had to cut it in half and cook it that way." And it just then kind of cycled through over 3 generations. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Couldn't they have just stored the other half and then like used it as an oven meal?
They could have. I don't know why people do anything of what they do, but you make a good point. And you should come work for me when people do silly things because you're younger than I am. You could say to them things that I wish I could say, but I can't say out loud. When it becomes on autopilot, there's just decisions that are made that are not rooted now in anything of presence, and sometimes they make no sense, right? And so you sit and you start to see, okay, I can't consciously engage in habitual behavior, but I can consciously break down habits and construct new ones. And what goes into it are multiple pieces, because it's all about the why, again, of what we do, right? These are things that we want to wake up our understanding of what we do. So the habits that you formulate, they fall into a 3-pronged formula. The middle of it is the act that you engage in. I bite my nails, I pick my nose, right? I don't pick my nose. But, be in a place where there's things that are the act in and of itself. The assumption is that you have to just shift the act. But the other 2 ends to the act are what's much easier to shift. There's the trigger or catalyst of the act, and then there's the thing that the act satisfies. It allows for you to feel like a reward or a craving gets fulfilled. And when I sit and I try to understand, I'm open with myself, right? So say I got really, really heavy, and I decided I don't want to be heavy anymore. And I now assume that my heaviness is attached to food. And I look at what I'm eating in the course of the day, and I see in the middle of the day that I have eaten, tons of cookies every afternoon. What's going on here? What this aspect of knowing why is about is not assuming that you're eating the cookies because of the cookies, But there might be different reason as to why you are engaged in that behavior. So I sit down and I start to understand it from both ends. Maybe I just need to get up from my desk and go for a walk. And I eat these cookies by default because they're sitting on the table at the end of my office. Maybe I like to talk to the person who's got the cookies in the office. If it has to do with food, I can gauge for myself by just not eating them. And then if I get hungry, then I start to eat something else if I need to. I'm more measured in it and present. But there could be like 12 different reasons as to why I'm eating the cookies that have nothing to do with cookies. Do you get what I mean? Just like there's probably a dozen different reasons as to why you struggle with certain things, and the most obvious reason sometimes is not the best, and you understand the thought process that the nafsani thoughts don't want you to get to the crux of the matter. You are a whole person. You don't do bad things because you're a terrible human being. There's gaps that come into play that sometimes have us now turn to things that give us temporary satisfaction because we don't know where else to turn. And in the midst of trying to numb ourselves from certain realities, we sometimes do things we're not so proud of. It becomes a habit. Why do you yell at the times that you yell or the people that you yell at habitually? Because you don't yell at other people. Why do you get to a place where things kind of rile you up? I am in a place where, I don't know about you, I know I talk about food a lot, but alhamdulillah. I used to not eat zabiha halal food for a long time. Up until I was 12, I was eating anything else. There's nothing, it's an opinion. And then I shifted when I was 12. I could still walk past a Burger King, and I turned 40 last week, and the smell of a Whopper makes my mouth water. It's not even good. It's gross. It's really processed. You should not be eating this stuff. But it evokes memory that just has now habitual reaction. The smell of something can do that. Do you understand? You could walk into a place and it reminds you of somebody you used to spend time with. You can orient this to your success. So you build routine habitually. The Prophet ﷺ would recite the quls before he went to bed, would be in a state of wudu, the last two verses, Surah Baqarah, Ayatul Kursi, and there's specificity that you want to take from it, but his body also is now winding down. He's built triggers through micro habits that his body knows it's time to get ready for bed. And it's not randomness every single day. And you got to think about it so that you're not just stuck at the surface level of ritual that says I'm doing it, but not drawing secondary, tertiary benefits from it that help you in the rest of your routine and your structure. You see what I mean? And so those things become important because some of it is just on autopilot. I just respond in these ways. I allow for myself to be absence of intention because I've built up habits that are things that are not strategic, and they now render for me an absence of consciousness. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on this so far? Any questions? So what I like to do, if you take like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and turn to the person next to you, what are some of the things you're taking away so far? What is it bringing up for you? Some of the things that it's kind of evoking for you, and then we'll come back and discuss. If you don't know the person's name next to you, learn their names, and then we'll come back and debrief. How's this going? It's going okay? Great, alhamdulillah.
But even like New York Times, they have this section that has like pretty stressful articles. And last week, they actually kind of talked about like I am it's like some kind of meditation called like loving meditation helps. I don't know. It's like rhetorical something love meditation. It's really popular. But all it is like for like 20 minutes, all you repeat are like the lines like I am loved, I am happy, I am successful.
Oh, thank you so much. Amazing. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you. Yeah, I'll give it to him when I get home. That's so kind. Thank you so much.
Kids leave their stuff all the time. Water bottles.
Oh yeah, yeah. These guys leave these things everywhere. I appreciate you brought it to us. Thank you. Yeah, there should be a bunch. Go for it. Yeah, go for it. I'll see you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
I wake up, I'm like, here we don't have bad moods. Probably because your job is stressful. You're just like, oh man. Sometimes, like, you're just like, oh, why are you? Yeah, I think it's supposed to my mom's a people that definitely deserve it's not so sad, but kind of it's like weird. So I know like we're joking with the so there's this girl in my high school is something that I always think is actually every time I try to like stay out and what's funny is that same thing right now like it takes an activity and every time I'm talking about her it's like a serious it's continuously okay this no I don't there's this one prisoner, he came in, she's doing like a health check. This guy's been in jail for a while. And like, she's doing with their court. Right. And I think like sleeping light.
Okay. So, what are some of the things we're taking away so far? What do you think? What are some of the things? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, simply, I guess, core beliefs lead to habits, because that's what we like understood. So like that can lead, like when you were mentioning at the beginning with the whitening cream, right? It's like that core belief led to a habit of beginning to use that towards.
So you say core beliefs can lead to habits, right? And so utilizing the skin whitening cream as an example, it creates now a mindset that then leads to acts that can be very detrimental, right? Yeah.
I was saying, like, I guess, removing toxic, again with the whitening cream, like removing those toxic traits from being indoctrinated into society further, like break the branch, like try to break the branch off of those toxic traits, I think.
Yeah, and look, a part of this also, it's individual journey, but recognizing you have no idea what kind of stuff people go through. You know what I mean? And when you try to make sense of somebody else's behavior, the minute you attach specificity without really knowing what you're talking about, you removed yourself as an opportunity for that person to find their own growth and healing. Right? You can't explain people's behaviors sometimes. Sometimes people do things for all kinds of reasons we don't know. And from the outside looking in, it's with an air of compassion, like an air of love, right? Because how I see you doesn't tell me about you, but how I see you tells me a lot about me. You know what I mean? And I don't know why somebody does half the stuff that they do, but I don't want to assume on their behalf. It's subjective. I wrestle with my intentions, and our tradition teaches us that you want to practice husn al-dhan of people. You want to think the best of them, and not in ways that make sense, and only in ways that make sense, right? So certain things are just off limits. Somebody's being abusive. There's no two sides to this, right? The consequences of the actions are still there. It's not a kind of neutrality that makes any sense whatsoever. Do you see what I mean? But there's a difference between that and somebody who might walk into a space and doesn't talk to anybody. And they've been in a place now where their life has cultivated this, and they're in this place habituated. It doesn't mean that that's where they have to be, but somebody's got to take the responsibility of being a source of real support and kindness and compassion, even when it's not convenient. You see what I'm saying? What else? What are other things we're taking away? And then there's one other thing we're going to talk about quickly before we wrap up. Somebody else, what did you talk about? Yeah.
I just want to say I saw a notification on the Instagram Live, and it said, never mind.
What did you talk about?
No, you can say what it said. What did it say?
It said, I saw my aunt's Instagram account, and it said, Zeba311 requested to be in your live video.
That's your aunt?
Yeah.
Oh man, look at that. What a coincidence. Wow. Where does your aunt live?
In New York.
They live in Manhattan also?
From Florida like a couple months ago.
Amazing. I feel like we're learning so much about each other right now. This is great. MashaAllah. What else? Yeah.
So what we talked about was, I talked with my mom and I talked with Ms. Pablo. We talked about actions like doing things with her, like actually having an intention to do things. Because my mom gave an example, I go to the park every day after school. Do I go there because I make a choice every single day, I intend to go to the park? Or do I do it habitually because everyone else goes and just because I do it every day? It's a part of my habit. So maybe we should start looking at everything we do in our life with more intention instead of just doing things mindlessly because it's that's what you see in front of you.
Yeah, and why? Why do you want to live with intention? What's the point of that? Why is there hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is described, كَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَذْكُرُ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ أَحْيَانِ, but the Messenger of God was remembering God all of the time. And the du'as that we learn and all these things that are masnoon, they are sunnah du'as that precede acts, but he knows why he's doing what he's about to do before it gets done, right? And you can just find that much more meaning in it. There's that much more opportunity to take from it at the end of the day. I'm not just going here in a way that's idle, but I know what I'm taking from this, and I'm going to get out of it what I need to get out of it because there's firm intentionality in this way. You don't want to buy a house just because you're supposed to buy a house. What does it make any sense? My wife and I were looking for houses pre-COVID, and then in the pandemic, everything went helter-skelter. And then at some point we sat down and we were like, why are we doing this? Every person I'm not discouraging you to buy a house. You want to buy a house, Allah make it easy for you. But every person that I spoke to who was a friend of mine who bought a house, they were like putting in so much money because everything broke. I've lived in Manhattan for 22 years. I have like people who live in the Gramercy Green building. Something breaks in my apartment, they come and fix it. You know, I'm not trying to like mow a lawn right now, right? We went to this volunteer event on Sunday or Saturday or one of these days, I don't even know. And my kids were raking leaves, right? And your kids were doing stuff too. And I told my what were you doing?
I was painting the benches.
You were painting the bench? Yeah, great. And when I saw my daughter doing this and painting and planting, I said, girl, this is good because if we buy a house, I'm not raking anything. You're going to be fixing all this stuff. And because she was like, Baba, look how good I'm at raking. I love it. And I was like, amazing, because you're going to do it every week if we get something, right? But most of us are in pursuit of things because of what people think. And Allah gave you aql so that you can affirm for yourself what you think. And then if people get offended, well, tell them to mind their business. They got to live their own life. You can name your kid what you want to. You can marry who you want to. You can be in a place where you are able to exert decision, so long as you understand accountability is rested in this thing of intention. And even if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it's still coming from you, right? So now is the time to sit and say, what is it that I'm actually pursuing? And the things that I've been chasing, and the moments where I need balance, they haven't given it to me. And so what is it that's going to allow for me to feel that sense of contentment? Other thoughts? Yeah.
So I was talking to my cousin who she was showing me on social media these, I guess they're Ugg boots that Bella Hadid wore out to get her coffee, and now all of a sudden everybody wants these boots. And I mentioned that these boots have been around for a very long time. And she said, yeah, and I want them, and you know, and it's interesting that suddenly, because she wore them just for a 15-minute run, suddenly everybody wants these boots, and it just, I mean, you could be saving yourself $100-something, but because this famous person's wearing them, suddenly you want them.
Yeah.
Do you even like them?
And it's a great segue into the third bucket we want to talk about tonight. That is this idea of just following the masses in a herd mentality. None of what we're talking about is rooted in just a overtly bad or good, but you can leverage these things to get things done. You know, Abu Lahab engages in this when the Prophet ﷺ starts to publicly invite people to Islam. And he stands on a mountain, a cliff, and he says, would you believe me if I told you behind this mountain was an army ready to attack you? And they only know him as a trustworthy individual. Character is impeccable, right? May Allah grant us a character like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they believe him because that's just who they know him to be. And he says then, when they affirm, like, yes, we would believe you, he says, then know this, that I have been sent as a messenger, as a warner. If you were to take from me what I say, there would be good for you in this world and in the next. And if you don't, then that's between Allah to decide for you what's going to happen to you, right? People are listening. They're hearing things. And then Abu Lahab interjects and he says, Taba'an laka alihada jama'atana, that may you be perished. This is why you gathered us together. Because he disrupted the cycle that was rooted in business. He took people from the marketplace in the middle of the day. You're making me lose money or not make money is essentially a base of this comment. And everybody's attention just now gets disrupted. And Abu Lahab turns away and everybody else turns away. And that's how a lot of us do what we do. You can pray the way somebody else prays, and you can dress how somebody else dresses. You can't believe something because somebody else believes it. And the parts to this religion that teach you to waken up your heart, to waken up your consciousness, to live with vitality and vibrancy is rooted not in just the acquisition of things outward, but being able to understand what's going on in the world inside of you and prioritizing that and letting that be something that you pay attention to. The Prophet ﷺ uses this in a good way, where they have the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and he makes a deal now, and people are flustered, right? Umar radiallahu an goes to different individuals, to Abu Bakr radiallahu an, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, right? Alasna bil muslimin wa alaysu bil mushrikeen. Are we not Muslims and these are the mushrik? Why are we making deals with them? And then the Prophet goes into his tent after he tells people, like, slaughter your animals, remove your ihram. They're going to make Hajj. And not only are they going to make Hajj, these are people who have not been home for a long time. They left everything for Islam. They understood what sacrifice was, not in a romanticized way. And now when they left, they're coming back, and all of it is being shut down, and they're being told, we're going back without going to where we intended. Nobody listens to the Prophet. That's how distraught they are. And he goes into his tent, he talks to Salama and says, nobody's listening to me. And she says to him that if you do it and they see you do it, they will also do it. Do you understand? So the idea is to not live egocentrically, but if you are going to aspire towards emulating, then emulate what are things that are actually good for you. And if you want to wear something because somebody else wears it and it looks nice, good. That's fine. But you gotta have emulation also, and a desire to surround yourself with people that you can catch up to sometimes. That they're gonna push you to get to your potential best. So you look in your own friends circle and you think, who is it that I am around regularly that is a person of integrity? Because the same way you can catch physical illness, right? May Allah protect us from it. You can also catch spiritual illness. The way that colds are contagious and COVID is contagious, may Allah protect us always and grant us healing, spiritual maladies are contagious. And you will sit in a circle with people saying all kinds of terrible things. It might sound like it makes sense, but at the base of it, all you're doing is creating fitna. There's no gain, there's no benefit, there's no detriment, or only detriment rather. And this herd mentality has to be disrupted. On my own terms and intentions, I'm going to sit down and take from somebody else. I'm going to not be enthralled by externals alone. I could put you in front of people, man, who know religion inside and out, and they're jerks. A lot of people turn away from religion because of quote-unquote religious people. You don't want to be in a place where that's what it is that impresses you. The person who's the CEO that has multi-million dollars, that's in a system that's going to always privilege him and never privilege you. You just got to wake up to the reality of the dunya. It's not defeatist or nihilistic. You work for a world that's bigger than this. Let people race towards the material. You know why you do what you do. And it impacts every level. Have you ever gone to a restaurant, you're hungry and you're with your friends, and you're walking down an avenue, and there's a place where there's a lot of people eating, and there's a place where nobody's eating. And you will go, more often than not, to the place that has more people eating, even if you have to wait a little bit, not for any other reason other than you see people sitting there, and you're just doing what it is that they do. I was in a doctor's office the other day, and I sat in the doctor's office, and I kid you not, I am, in a place where we're waiting for a while, and I'm sitting in the chair in the waiting area, and then a little bit into it, my leg is hurting, so I just stood up. And I'm standing instead of seating, and no one else is sitting there. And then a woman came, and she came in the waiting area, and then she stood. And then two more people came, and all of them stood. And I'm a pretty obnoxious human being, so I didn't sit down, nor did I say, hey, you all can sit down because I'm standing because my foot hurt. But I was like, let me observe what is about to happen here. And every person that walked in over the course of the next 5 minutes that filled the waiting room of this urgent care, they were all standing. And then the nurse came out and she looked at all of us like we're a bunch of fools. And she said, why are you all standing up? She's thinking, is there a mouse on the floor? Did like something happen? Nobody had any idea as to why they were standing. Do you get what I'm saying? And all of them couldn't look at me because all of them didn't come in and see only me standing, but then they saw 2 of us standing, and 3 of us standing, and 5 of us standing. This is how you make a lot of decisions. And you can let your heart be sovereign. Do you get what I mean? I wait for people to be the first one to take food at iftar. Good. Wait with intention. Don't wait because your stomach is hungry and you want to jump at the food, but wait with a firm intention that says, hey, I'm going to let the elders eat first. I'm going to let somebody else who maybe was fasting eat first. It doesn't mean you shouldn't eat. There's more barakah in all of us eating together. Do you see what I mean? You don't want shaitan to get in your head. The food is for everybody. Alhamdulillah. But it's very different than I'm walking on eggshells because I don't know if I'm supposed to go and do it. Right? This is also important in understanding that you can't be afraid to make mistakes. We have hadith that tell us that if we were a people who did not sin, Allah would get rid of all of us and replace us with people who did so that He would have a creation to forgive. It is in your nature that you are going to make mistakes. Perfection is a foolish endeavor. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on the people around you so that they now create different modes of why they do what they do. Does this make sense? And so, go eat where you want to eat. Don't eat somewhere just because there's a line outside the door, or do it on your own terms. Somebody else doesn't get up to pray, you don't need their permission. Get up and make wudu. Get it done. What are you waiting for? When you go to bed tonight, you sit and you think, why am I pursuing the career that I am in? Why do I have this degree that I have? Why did I get married? Why do I have children? Why do I have these things? Not in a kind of paranoid way, but in a way that allows for you to feel the kind of the empowerment of affirmed intentionality. Do you get what I mean? Because it's exhausting just running as if you're like a body and the only thing that you have is your physical self in this world. And a lot of the tiredness gets in the way because our mind doesn't stop functioning, but the exhaustion now determines and dictates how it is that we process things, you know? And when you can be in a place where it's not easy, it's really hard. I have, for years of my life, been the only Muslim in many spaces. And what it does to you can be very difficult. So you have to also have a firm intention as to what brings you to spaces like this, so that you can be with people in gatherings that the angels descend. And you're in a space where you understand we've been given a ni'mah through our religion, that it's not just meant to be outward forms and whether I'm good or bad at Islam. That's not like the point of it. The point of it is to affirm a quality of goodness that has you be in a place where this ritual and practice is transformational. It becomes a lot easier to let go of it when you're just praying with a body and not praying with a heart. But what's keeping you from praying with the heart is not the heart itself. It's all this other stuff that's cluttered in there that you got to address and deal with. You see what I mean? And it all then converges. The number of people who come and sit in my office who hate themselves. They're like, there's no point in me, fasting. I don't even pray. I'm this and I'm that. Shaitan has victory over them through this self-talk. And the heaviness that they have inwardly is literally making it too hard to get up to do anything. You get what I mean? And Allah knows you better than you know yourself. That's why you want to have intent to connect to the divine. Because our God is not looking for a reason to push us away, but looking for a reason to bring us closer. Can we read really quickly the first part of the next paragraph? And then we'll kind of move forward. You must therefore utter no word. Anybody? Go ahead, Sharif.
Therefore, utter no word, do no action, and decide no matter without the intention of drawing nearer thereby to God, and seeking the reward He has assigned, through His beneficence and grace to the intended act. And know that by drawing nearer to Him can only be done through the obligatory and supererogatory devotion that He has indicated through His messenger. May blessings and peace be upon him.
Yeah, mashallah. And then he goes on to say, sincere intention may change the merely licit into the devotional, for means are judged according to their ends. And so here, when we're doing something for the sake of the divine, knowing who Allah is to you is going to become important. And we talked about this before, where I gave you examples about my own wife, her relationship to our daughter, and understanding from that Allah's love being greater than a mother's is to its child. But understanding here, right, that these rituals are given as a conduit for something. But again, the paradigm is rooted in intention. If you see it as burdensome obligation, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. But if you see it as what it was intended for, and you use it in that way, and understand, right, the hadith, it tells us that the first thing you're going to be questioned about is your salah on the Day of Judgment. May Allah grant us ease on that day. And when we're asked about it, and they find deficiencies, the angels, in our salah, and they come back to Allah and they say that they didn't do all of their fard. There's gaps in their obligations. Our God tells His angels to go back and see, did they do anything extra? Any sunnahs, any nafils? Looking for any reason to be able to justify and validate. Why I want to intend to do for that God is because there's a lot of good people in the world, but there's also a lot of just disgusting people in the world. And I don't want to live in a way where I have to be in reaction to everybody else. Others have beauty to them, but that doesn't mean I don't have beauty to me. And when I can understand a God that does not look simply at my form, but looks at my heart and looks at my deeds in conjunction to that, and really strive to be in a place where the fundamental connection is to an entity that is not just watching me, but watching over me, and ties that now to a question of why that is rooted in what comes next. The Day of Judgment is where every question of why is answered. Things are made balanced. So this is going to feel like a drop in the bucket. And so you can affirm intention through these acts that say, I'm doing this because the one who created me told me that my performance of them is what's going to then endow me with an ability to feel empowered through all of this. It doesn't mean that losing a loved one still won't hurt, but what the hurt does to you will change. It doesn't mean that people will suddenly stop being terrible human beings, but you'll be able to embrace your luminosity a little different. You'll be able to live with your beauty a little bit differently. And the intention, it changes the act. You could literally go and have a cup of ice cream with somebody, and it can be rooted in an intention that says, I know this person doesn't know anybody here. And what might just be you licking a cone fundamentally becomes the mechanism for someone to feel like they belong. The act in and of itself might seem mundane, but what you bring to it that you don't have to express, you don't have to grab the guy and be like, hey, you know what? We're only going out because I think you don't have friends. And because of that, I don't want you to be alone, and we're going to spend time together. But you just know why you do what you do. It's not condition of giving zakah that the person you're giving the zakah to has to know that it's zakah that they're receiving. Do you understand? So your love can be a motivator that takes now what is mundane and let it be something that is profoundly amazing. And you transform what is a small act into a big, beautiful deed, not because it has to be at the scale of I built an entire masjid, but I'm working in my capacity. I'm just getting done what I can get done, but I know why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing. And it'll help me to understand then, why don't I do the things that I have the ability to do? What's populating my time so much? Does this make sense? Okay. Any questions, comments before we wrap up? We're going to get through the rest of the chapter in the next week. But any thoughts, any questions, any comments, anything? Yeah.
I guess one of the hardest things to understand and grapple with is if we suffer like trauma when we're children, before we're responsible, and that impacts us throughout our lives and gives us like low self-esteem, PTSD, all kinds of things, and then we end up in a place where we maybe don't feel like we're worthy of things, and we're not good enough to pray, and like you mentioned. How do we understand that? Is that really shaitan that has, is that our nefs, or is that shaitan that has victory over us? Or how do we, like, which is it, and how do we get out of it? Like, because I guess it's an existential question, but like Allah put us in these situations before we were able to kind of comprehend them, and then the effects of these things reverberate throughout our lives, and our decisions are influenced by those traumas. So sometimes we'll reach a point where we say, well, why did this happen to me, and then we don't know how to get past that, and we don't know if it's, where do you turn? Is it a medical thing? Is it a religious thing? There are a lot of sort of questions involved in it, and how do we know if it's shaitan that's causing us to feel that way, or if it's a natural response to the trauma?
Well, a few things that come to mind, and anybody wants to chime in, also feel free. In understanding that exemptions in our tradition are rooted in conditions that are not merely physical conditions, but also emotional wellness conditions, mental wellness conditions. They all fit into that box and category. And quite often, for us to understand how we get to a place of knowing a way to approach something, we can affirm what we shouldn't be doing in trying to get there. So in a circumstance like this, you want to think out for yourself, where platitudes are just not helpful. Right when you're talking to somebody, put your trust in God, have faith in God. This is a test from God. Why is God testing a child? And this is a reasonable question and a necessary question. And most questions, theologically, when we get to this place, we're going to fundamentally be in a place where we just have to say, I don't know, to some of them. I can't answer rhetorically or academically in a way to justify my own passivity, but I think then communally, how do I know that there are people who sustain trauma and also receive transgenerational trauma, and the peoples that they talk to first did not make sense and did not help them? Trauma is not the event in and of itself. The trauma is experienced as the emotional disturbance post the event. And the persons that you engage immediately thereafter are the ones that are going to create opportunity for healings in different ways. This is why, as much as we have religious scholars on our staff, we have a lot of people who also just understand people, because everything is not answered in a black and white fiqh textbook. The other ways that I would say we'd want to think about this individually at your own pace. It's not easy, but you find people that you could talk to that you trust. A therapist, a counselor. It might not be a friend or a family member, and quite often those can be the not worst people in the sense that they don't care about you, but they don't know what they're doing. And because they love you so much, their own anxiety kicks in, and they don't want you to feel pain. They'll become more solution-oriented than affirming and validating. I spoke at a masjid in New Jersey on Saturday, and they had Q&A, and there was a woman who seemingly was elder, because she's talking about teenage kids that she has, and she said, my kids just don't talk to me anymore. And it's in a typed out question, and she says, I feel disconnected and all these things. So the first thing that I said to her was, I'm really sorry that this is what you're going through. And I can't imagine what that feels like. And it's really good that you're able to make yourself vulnerable and to explore some of these things. so you don't have to hold it within yourself or pretend like it's not there. And then I said to everybody, I don't know how to answer this generically, because there's a couple of hundred of you in the room and all of you have specifics. So you can't take life understandings from YouTube videos or lectures that you weren't even seated in that took place years ago. The number of conferences that I've spoken at in my life where I see people who are on panels with me that, in my opinion, are very irresponsible in how they share personal anecdote and make that seem as if that is absolute Islam. It can be really detrimental when somebody who does not have a skill set is speaking to something that is outside of their purview. Let alone then you're walking through a bazaar and there's like thousands of people who are carrying real heaviness inside, and they grab Sheikh so-and-so or Imam such and such, and in a 2-minute conversation will say to them, should I let my daughter marry this guy? And that guy doesn't know your daughter, doesn't know you, doesn't know the guy. He could be an idiot. But also, it's not going to do justice to your heart. And it's hard because that's where people are at. So here, as you understand why you do what you do, nobody is going to build for us what we have to build for ourselves. At some point, you have to ask, in reference to this question, how much wealth is enough? And how do I live in a certain lifestyle so that I build out the services, the resources? I staff every masjid in my locale with somebody who knows how to perform a psycho-spiritual model of wellness and therapy that not only lives in a silo but informs the khutbah that's taking place on the minbar, sits down with the imam and says, in the last week I've talked to 5 people that have bipolar disorder. I've talked to 6 people who struggle with clinical depression. So he's not just standing up there saying foolish things like sadness is a sign of a weakness of your faith. Do you see how it complicates it and it's all connected? But do you also see how you have to be a part of the process? There's not just enough to point the finger and say, that's wrong, we got to build it so that it's better for other people. There's a psychologist who shares an anecdote of going to Vietnam where people were just bombarded with the military-industrial complex, right? Our country has a glorification of war, and these were people in contemporary times that were walking through rice fields that still had landmines in the fields. And there was an elder man whose job was to work in the rice fields, and he tripped over a mine and it exploded and he lost both of his legs. This psychologist is talking to these people now about antidepressants, and he's not negating medication. I'm not a psychiatrist. You should not listen to anybody who tells you there's one way for anyone. If you take medication, great. You go through different variations of it, that's fine. It's not a better or a worse. And as he's talking to these people in Vietnam now about antidepressants, and they bring up this man who lost his legs and has trauma. If you have ever seen a rice paddy, the field is submerged in water. You guys picture it in your head? It's a field sunken in water. This is how you grow the rice. His prosthetics will get damaged walking in rice water, right? The water is not good for the prosthetic. He has to go to the same field that the bomb exploded that took his legs. He has the anxiety of having to provide for his family and loved ones. If I don't do this, they're not going to eat. There's a whole mess of thoughts that goes through his head instantly every time he walks into this rice field. And this guy's talking to the people who live with him and speaking about antidepressants, and they said, we know what antidepressants are. And he said, not in a mocking way, like, how do you know that? We're in this remote village where all this stuff is what it is. And they said, should we show you? And he said, of course. And they took the psychologist and they walked him to where there was a giant dairy cow. And they said, here is the antidepressant. And he said what these people saw was the role they played communally in helping their brother get out of his trauma. so that he didn't have to go to the place where his prosthetics were damaged. He didn't have to go to the place where the bomb exploded. He didn't have to deal with also the alternative of saying, I don't have money. They pooled their wealth together to buy this cow. That is not a simple thing to do, but they know why they do what they do. They live intentionally. They didn't let this guy feel like he was alone. Do you understand what I mean? I said this at Jummah last week. I'm going to say it to you all because a lot of us hang out every Monday night. As this pandemic curtails, we are getting back into the business of building what it is that we have the ability to build. You don't have to be a part of that process, but I would love for you to be a part of that process. As your brother who loves you, I do not believe that Allah gave to you what He gave to you so that it would be self-serving. I fundamentally do not believe that. And I believe you have more to give than you might realize. And in supportive community, we can come together and understand that if a bunch of villagers can buy a cow and pool their money, and it's not as if they're not going to have to tighten their waistbands and struggle in terms of what they're eating and feeding and what holidays will look like for a bit, but they know that every person is important. And just like we built a shelter, we're going to, inshallah, build clinics. We're going to build food pantries. We're going to get done the things that we can get done. If you don't know why you're doing it, then you're not going to be able to do it as best as you can. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is why intention is not just rotely parroting. It's for the sake of Allah. But you really think about what that means and how we can be a part of it. If anybody's struggling with things as you go through these exercises, let me know. I'm happy to sit with you when I can, and if it's beyond my expertise, which it definitely might be, I will refer you to other people that you can unpack things, right? Your spiritual heart has capacity to it. It is not infinite in what it holds. This thing is filled with something. I cannot put something in it until I let out other things. And sometimes the process of letting out is very hard. Sometimes it's a little easy. May Allah grant us ease. But to be in a place where the environment is controlled, you can be in a place where confidentiality is honored. There's so many different ways for us to pursue it. And then it gets to more of the crux that it's not just go and do it, and then you hate on yourself more. That why am I not able to get this done? But we remove the other obstacles that we might not even know are in the way that are sitting inside of us. And the last thing that I'll say here, just to reiterate it, and then we'll stop and pray Isha, just be kind to people. You know why I ask you to greet one another when you come in? Is so that you start to know the names of the people that you're praying with. There are like thousands of people who consider this space to be their community. We have ideas on how we're going to engage this more broadly, but you can share a smile with someone and it can make a huge difference. You can sit with intention that I will pray Isha so that at the end of it, I greet my sisters and brothers and just build depth to a relationship. And when you can get individually conscious people to then construct a community that's filled with individuals who are conscious and their hearts are awake, there's not going to be anybody that can keep us from doing the things that we can do.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.